Okay, let's talk today about the IDE that Flutter deserves. Okay, and the question I have to ask is why do we settle? It's 2025. Every year, our apps are getting smarter, our devices are getting faster. AI can build entire websites in seconds, but it feels like the tools that support our development are still stuck in the past. And so, my question is why don't we have an IDE that's specifically built for Flutter? And I think it's an interesting question because, if you look at the charts, Flutter's popularity is off the charts. It's the #1 framework for cross-platform development. You can see here, it leads in terms of developer engagement against other frameworks such as React's Native or Swift UI. And we at my company love Flutter. We put it in our name. My company is Flutterflow. And I think the reason we love it, of course, is that you write in one code base. You can target many different screen sizes, many different environments. It's something that we can write both front-end and back-end code in. And obviously, others seem to agree that it's an amazing framework. But I think that we are still duct taping our workflow together today. And I think that there's a better way. So today, I want to walk through what a typical day looks like for a Flutter dev right now. And then we'll step back and we'll look at the history of software and the tools that support it. And then I'm going to go over why we built a new Flutter native IDE. And then I'll actually showcase that and hopefully provide you 3 lightning demos so you can see it in action and its power. And then we'll go over where we see the future is and why we're just getting started. So let's walk through a hypothetical day. It's 2025 and you're a Flutter dev. What's the pain that you experience today? So maybe you start, maybe you work on Mac, and the first window that you have open on your desktop, of course, is Cursor. And that's loaded with maybe 15 extensions, 12 of which you don't really know what they do, but despite the fact that it has an integrated CLI, you also have your favorite CLI open. In my case, iterm2. And then beyond that, of course, you have a Chrome window open. And this is helpful for live previews, and you can go ahead and hot reload and see exactly what you're building. And then you might also have another window open with ChatGPT, maybe to ask some more architectural questions. And then just to double check that ChatGPT is right, you'll also have Claude open, or maybe if you're desperate, Grok. And then in addition to that, you'll have the Dart DevTools open, and it's got, 6 different tabs, a lot of power in that tool, but suddenly your desktop's getting a little bit cluttered. But we're not done yet. Of course, you work on a product team, and so you work with design tools as well, and you have Figma open. And then just for good measure, you're also gonna have the iOS simulator open. And I hope that you're not using a laptop for this, because that's a lot of windows to keep track of. You might have multiple desktops, and to keep it all managed in your memory is a lot. So you need a 4K monitor at least. And you start your workday, and you get a message from Deadline Dan, your PM. Hey, can you share a demo that we can play with? The customer call is in 90 minutes. And this freaks you out a little bit, so you start to think of your options for how you can show the code that you've been working on. And the first option is you could just do a screen recording, right? You just record your screen, send it off, no problem. The problem with that is that it's not super interactive, right? The customer is going to want to see and feel it, same with the PM. The other thing is you could end up building that staging environment that you've always dreamed of. You don't have it set up quite yet. It might take a couple days to set it up, but then you could send links for specific builds. How awesome would that be? But again, you've only got 90 minutes. And then the final option you think is you could teach them how to run your code. And this is an interesting one. Let's dive into that for just a second. So the first thing is you'll need to make sure that everybody has a GitHub account or access to Git, okay? And they're gonna need to clone the Git repo, which isn't always the easiest thing for non-technical people. And then they're gonna need to install the correct version of Flutter. And you have to give them that exact version number and make sure maybe they have to update their path. That's something kind of difficult for if you're a non-technical person. And then they have to install all the dependencies. That shouldn't be too bad, hopefully. Next, they probably should install the IDE so they can walk through your code a little bit better, maybe some of the extensions. And it's really important, if they want this to connect to the correct backend, that you provide them with this .env file, which has, all of the environmental variables that help to connect to your backend. And then finally, you're just going to need to be there to hold their hand and walk them through in case any issues come up, which it's very likely it would. This doesn't sound like a great option either. And worst of all, you're still working on the code. You don't really want to push your changes yet. And then you get a message from your teammate. This is Mergy Max, a fellow developer. And he says, hey, I just pushed some changes from my refactor. Can you pull? So yeah, sounds good, you think. You open up your terminal. Let's just do git fetch origin and git merge origin main. Pretty simple changes, right? Not too much going on there. So then the next step is just flutter pub get. And this is about my worst fear. I hate seeing this. If you've ever dealt with triangular dependency conflicts, this is pretty frustrating. Maybe a bad idea to pull, but in this case, you're not sure if they didn't commit everything or your local SDK is a different version, or maybe there's some packages in your branch that are incompatible with the other packages. And so you message them, and of course, they just reply the classic, it works on my machine. So you spend 20 minutes resolving that, and now it's time to get to work. And you need to fix this nasty pixel overflow bug that just got introduced when trying to make this responsive. You're going to use Cursor. You might even use Claude 4 Sonnet Max for this. And here's where you enter what I like to call the cursor slot machine loop. And here's what happens. You prompt Cursor with a problem, you submit that, and it begins thinking. And this can take some time. So you might open your phone and scroll some TikTok. You'll probably set Cursor to use the ding when done notification sound. Fantastic feature. And then it'll be done, and that's where you can jump back into action. And you hot restart. And you see that the error has still persisted. And that's where you then copy the logs, paste the logs into Cursor, and then submit it again. And maybe this happens 4 times, maybe 5 times. Kudos to you if you've never entered the Cursor slot machine loop. I certainly have, and it's not very fun. You are just gambling with tokens here. And now you get a ping from your designer. And they want a slightly different date format. They want just a little more padding on something, and they also want to change the hover color of the button. And you think to yourself, these are all easy changes. I can make these changes, but you don't get paid the big bucks to be tweaking properties, right? Or correcting typos. You should be applying your mental bandwidth to solving NP-hard problems. And I think this is the problem. We are surrounded by tools that are duct taped together. And I think there's a couple pain points here. The first is dependency hell. If you have ever collaborated with teammates, you know that you often spend hours debugging dependency conflicts over the course of a project. We're also debugging UIs blind, both the IDE and humans. And so text is not really the most natural medium to debug a visual app, and our IDEs aren't inherently aware of the layouts and constraints and visual properties. Next, you're doing a lot of context switching. You've got 13 different windows open, multiple tabs, multiple displays. Maybe you have a clipboard manager, which is just there to collect all the context so that you can then paste it into an LLM. And none of your tools really talk to each other, right? So your job is more of a switchboard operator. And then you've got that local setup friction, which makes it so difficult for your non-technical teammates to follow along and provide extra feedback. And then finally, we have this LLM slot machine I mentioned. You're literally spending tokens on agents that don't really understand Flutter. They don't have access to its tools. They don't utilize vision appropriately. And then finally, modern IDEs are really just this collection of text boxes today. So you're working with UX that's mostly from the early 2000s. That's when Sublime came out in 2008. VS Code is actually 2015, but that's still 10 years ago. So it feels like all we've done with these tools now is bolted AI onto them. Let's do this. So, what a mess, right? How on earth did we get here? And I think it's really important to look at the evolution of software itself to explain it and to explain how the tools themselves have evolved. So let's dive a little bit into the history and some of these abstraction layers. But first, you may be wondering who I am. So hi, I'm Michael, and I'm a product manager at Flutterflow, where I lead our agent quality for our app called DreamFlow. And I actually live close by in Munich, Germany, with my wife and my 3 kids. And previously, I worked at Google, where I was in the developer tooling space. And it was honestly, I was in the space when it felt a little dry. It was a little bit before LLMs started to just devour our code base. But I really think that right now, with the advances of AI and everything that we're building at DreamFlow, it's maybe the most exciting time ever to be in developer tooling. So my company is Flutterflow, and we manage the world's largest interactive Flutter runtime with over 40 million Flutter builds. We have 50,000 App Store deploys under our belt with our users, and we've generated billions of lines of Flutter code. And one of the biggest differentiators for us is visual development, and I'll get to that in just a second. So technology always progresses in these waves of abstraction, and these abstractions help us to manage complexity and increase productivity. So in 1945, programming meant physically rewiring circuits. So we have binary code as this abstraction of physical states. And then language comes in as this abstraction of binary logic. And this is really like assembly at the time. And then in the 1970s, you have languages like C that give programmers a little bit more control than assembly. But really, the 1990s, you have Java, you have Python coming along, and these abstract away, memory management and all these low-level details. And then IDEs come in, and this is things like VS Code. These obviously help support programming languages through syntax highlighting, debugging, some linting as well. And then somewhere around this area of the stack is where things like Flutter come in, and they abstract common patterns and target environments. Now, in the 2020s, we've kind of hit our stride here. This is where visual development comes in. And I think it's a major leap in abstracting UI implementation and building out logical flows. And I would say it's not instead of code. It just runs on top of code, and it makes certain tasks way easier and way more intuitive. And then finally, AI comes in, and it basically abstracts all of the layers beneath, and it lets you just focus on user intent. So you might not use every single layer, but you might pick and choose the right layer for the right tools. So for instance, you might use the visual layer to design your UIs. You might jump down to the code if you need to make some performance optimizations, and then maybe you use AI for more architectural leaps. So in case you're not familiar with it, Flutterflow sits at this layer of the abstraction hierarchy. It is a visual development platform, and it renders changes live as you edit. And I want to take a minute just to emphasize why visual development is so huge. And it really comes down to our brain wiring. So over half of the cerebral cortex is involved in processing what we see. And there's actually 2 types of visual pathways here that end up processing. One is kind of this what side, and the other is this where and how stream, okay? And the what side is really good at detecting objects and shapes and symbols, maybe reading code. And the where and how is way better at sort of spatial awareness and relationships and motion. And so if we apply this now to code, you can see, yeah, characters, symbols, reading code gets lit up with this what stream. But in general, for most of the development that we're doing, we're barely touching this where and how stream, which is lit up with layouts and flows and UIs. And so there's this huge missed opportunity to leverage this other half of the brain. And I think it's dramatically more intuitive to adjust padding visually like this, or perhaps other properties such as alignment or your main axis size or your cross-axis alignment, main axis alignment. You don't have to keep any of these constants in your memory. You just point and click. And this is much better for certain tasks. I think the same can be said for certain tasks that you would maybe use AI. You wouldn't use AI to, say, make text italic or prompt for little minute changes necessarily. It's way better often to just code with your eyes when you're working with UIs. So that's a little bit about the history. And I think that the tools that Flutter developers rely on haven't really changed much as we've faced this evolution. So they're fundamentally just text editors with AI bolted on. And that's why we decided to build something different from the ground up. And a lot of what I just showed you is Flutterflow. So you might be thinking, is that the solution I'll show today? And the answer is no. But we did learn a lot about Flutterflow. And so I'm going to show you quickly some insights that we had from Flutterflow. The first is, it's really a joy to build visually. If you've ever done it before, it really unlocks that extra side of your brain. Humans really love what you see is what you get, and that's the type of interface that we're trying to build. The second is that shared environments are really good for teams. So everybody's working in the same platform. They can all see exactly the same thing. Instead of creating lots of separate non-production artifacts, such as design files, you all just work on the code base. And then, of course, it's just an amazing feeling to tap a toggle and suddenly Firebase is connected or Stripe payments are integrated. And so having a platform that has these capabilities is fantastic. And finally, there's really this wealth of Flutter domain knowledge that we have from over 20,000 unique pub.dev dependencies in our builds. And we can kind of leverage some of these edge cases to really understand how to build cross-platform apps well. I think one of the best examples of this is, we might find for an audio recording package that Safari on Mac OS might expect a different encoding than Chrome on Android 14. And so we can kind of tune the models to be aware of these platform limitations and specific package limitations. But I think there was also some shortcomings of Flutterflow, which I want to address. And one of the most common things that people tell me is that they want to use Flutterflow to build their code, but they have already an existing app. And there's not really a clean way to import that into Flutterflow because we actually use our own abstraction layer on top of that. And then the other thing is that, it's related, AI isn't super fluent in this abstraction layer. We have to come up with lots of examples to try and tame it and make it aware of a language that's not just Dart. And so we've seen from some of our tests, you'll give it an input and the output that it produces in this abstraction layer is less than ideal. And so we just ended up finding out that LLMs love writing Dart code. And that was one of the things that we had to take into, we went back to the drawing board. We tried to figure out how can we build the ideal IDE for Flutter, which builds on all of the amazing aspects of Flutterflow, but then also layers in being able to work with any code base and also is super powerful with AI. And so when we look at the abstractions, one thing becomes super clear. Flutter code needs to be the source of truth, okay? And then I think we need to also layer in, like I said, that visual understanding, those higher abstraction modules, which might abstract away certain service implementations or common boilerplate. And finally, agentic intelligence needs to be at the core here. And specifically for that, we need to expose a whole tool set that's Flutter specific. And this IDE needs to understand Flutter, not just text files. So we designed an IDE from the ground up to solve the key challenges that product teams face today. And I'd love to show it to you right now.
What if building an app started with just an idea? You describe what you want, and DreamFlow starts building. DreamFlow brings omni-surface editing to app development. Edit visually, with code, or via an agent. Start with a visual canvas, where you can interact with and inspect your running app. and adjust any property right here in the UI. DreamFlow is code native, so your code is the single source of truth. And when you're ready to collaborate with AI, just right-click. Add context, share a screenshot, or tell the agent exactly what you want. DreamFlow's agent understands your running app. It's reading your project, searching files, even fixing errors in real time. So when you ask for a change, the agent builds it for you right where you left off. Connect to backends, APIs, and databases in seconds. No boilerplate, no copy-paste. When you're ready to ship, deploy directly to the App Store. This is DreamFlow, a smarter, faster, more flexible way to build production Flutter apps.
So this is super early stage. We only launched this a couple months ago, but it's already really robust and really pretty capable. I'll show you just a couple of the apps that have been generated with DreamFlow right here. It's been pretty amazing to see what people have built between games to business apps to restaurant delivery stuff. It's pretty incredible. So I think it really solves some of these pain points that we identified earlier. For one, it's web-based, so it really runs anywhere. You don't need to have some of this local development headaches. It also has deep awareness of visual context and relationships. It can screenshot things. It has all of the widget properties and their layout kind of embedded in it. It's also this unified surface. So all of the tools that you might need to develop your app are centralized within this one platform. And then your app itself just runs in the center as a canvas, and you can click around, you can navigate to different pages, and then inspect things. The agent itself is not just a standard run-of-the-mill LLM. It's been injected with Flutter domain knowledge, and it's been optimized for Flutter with its tool set and its instructions. And finally, you have this tri-surface development, so you can jump into the code at any point. You can tweak things visually using the UI, and of course, you can use the agent for anything as well. And so it covers those three surfaces. So I want to go through right now just a couple examples, and I will say these have been pre-recorded. I'm never sure about the Wi-Fi, but we can skip ahead if we need to. So first, let's start with the prompt to app example, and then I'll also cover starting from a template and doing some sort of visual changes. And then finally, I'll actually import some existing code, and I can show you how it works with that. So prompt to app, we want to build an app for this conference. And so we're going to just ask for an event ticketing app for Fluttercon Europe 2025 with QR code check-in and a seat map visualization. And what's cool is you can obviously select the model you want, or you can just rely on auto. And in this case, I have some screenshot examples that I want to provide it of apps that I kind of liked how they laid this out. So here's a seat selection and a QR code screen, which I'll show in a second. One is just from a flight app and another from an event app. And we'll go ahead and submit that, and it'll begin working. And I'm sure you've used AI tools before. You understand how this works. The first thing that it does is formulate a plan. And so it'll formulate this plan on the left-hand side. You'll see the checklist. And then on the right-hand side, you can see some of the execution as well. And I think pretty soon we'll be able to review the actual architecture that's happening. But I should note, again, we've exposed very Flutter-specific tools here. And so it's well aware of pub.dev and how to change dependencies. Let's go ahead and take a look at the architecture. One of the things I should note is that we always, even for demo apps, we do a model and service architecture. So it becomes pretty simple to take your app from, say, just a demo initially to actually connect it to a production database, because we just swap out some of the demo stuff with the actual production credentials. And here we can see it's adding specific dependencies, and it'll collect images if it needs to. You can also go ahead and check out some of the specific generated files. I'm going to skip through some of this, but in general, this takes like about 6 minutes. So it takes a little bit to create the app, but the result is really high quality. And while you're waiting, you can go ahead and play Asteroids. This is one of the top feature requests for our product, which is a little surprising, is a global leaderboard for asteroids, which the funny thing is the higher your score, it's the longer you probably had to wait. So we actually want to bring the high score down over time. But anyway, we'll skip ahead and we can see pretty soon it's going to make some final touches and then it'll start to compile the code. And of course, if it notices any errors during compilation, it can go ahead and fix those. And pretty soon we'll see that it has generated, and now we're in DreamFlow, and you can see the canvas right here. I'm going to just change the viewport to a mobile viewport, and now this is your full running app right here, so you can click around with it. We also have a widget tree open on the left, and you can click on individual widgets, and then you can also see their properties in another panel that shows up on the right-hand side, which is our properties panel. Right now, no widgets selected, but if we go ahead and select something like a stack, you can see all of the individual properties, and literally every property is exposed here. So let's close that agent panel, and we'll go into inspect mode. And in this case, you can just hover over certain elements. And in this case, I look and I can see that it got the date wrong, so I can click on that text. And then over in the property panel, we see that everything about that text widget is exposed here, and we can make any changes as necessary. And then let's turn off inspect mode and actually take a look at this app. So we can scroll. It's obviously created a home screen here, and in addition, it looks like there's a ticket view, which looks pretty nice. And then we also have a tab at the bottom for seats. And I want to just take a look, and I do notice there's a pixel overflow on the initial generation, which isn't a huge problem because we can fix it with DreamFlow. So what we'll do is we'll find sort of the surrounding widget, and we can just navigate up the hierarchy. And what we can do is right-click on this column, and we'll just add this to the agent. And what it does is it takes a screenshot of that specific widget in addition to the code, and provides that as context to the LLM. And then we can just ask it, can you fix the pixel overflow errors? And here it'll work. And in about 1 minute, 2 minutes maybe, we'll have it hot reload, and we'll be able to see if it fixes these errors. And here it looks like it has just wrapped this in a horizontal scroll view, and those pixel overflow errors are gone. The next thing I want to show is being able to connect this to Firebase. I'm just looking at the time. I'm not sure we'll have enough time for this one, but like I mentioned, one of the cool things here is that we can connect directly to an existing project or create a brand new project for you, and it'll actually populate your database with demo content, and you can, it basically will just swap out the demo stuff that you see in the app locally from your database. It'll also add authentication and entry pages as well. Just given time, I'm going to skip ahead to the next demo. And this one I want to show starting from a template and a little bit more about the visual development side of things. So we have a couple templates. Our template library is growing. Maybe the first one I'll show is just, there's a ShadC and UI playground. This obviously just exposes a lot of common things from this design system. It's a great starting point if you want to build a really professional looking app. Another template to show is this financial dashboard. This is a very common, SaaS layout. It's responsive. It has a dark mode and a light mode. This is also a great way just to get started. And then you could prompt the agent to do whatever you want on top of that. And finally, an AI chat. This works exactly how you'd expect. This is cross-model, compatible. And so it has support for streaming, and you just swap in your API keys and are good to go. So let's start with this template. And we're going to go, I don't know why, but we're going to call it clarity. And then we'll create the project. Cool. And the first thing I want to show is the theme panel. And so this theme panel will actually parse all of the theme constants in your file and allow you to just change them right here. And in this case, I want this to look a little bit more like the Claude app. And so I'll do a different scaffold background color. And we can also toggle on and off light mode and dark mode to see how that looks. And zooming in, this is again the running version of our app. I can interact with the app. I can just submit something, and then pretty soon I could go back to that inspect mode. And here we can actually start exploring the composition of this app, where I actually want to add a card to it, like a dynamic card that might show some information. And so I'll look and I find this column, and I think this is a good place to maybe insert a container. And so we expose all of the widgets here that are available to you. Here's a container, and now I'll go to the property panel and I can just remove that width so that we have it full width. And then inside the container, we'll want to add a row. Okay, and that populates with some text. I'll add an image as well, and this actually makes it pretty simple to upload assets as well. So we can upload this pen and then use it there. And then I also want to add maybe a button on the other side. And I'll wrap this text in an expanded and then change the spacing between elements and add a little bit of padding around that row. Now we can change the text content itself. And maybe we want to wrap this in a column because there will be sort of like detail text underneath it. Within this column, again, we have access to this main axis alignment and whatnot, and we can duplicate this text so that we can just add the address here, for instance. This is looking pretty good. Let's change this to say, a smaller text size, and we can make this bold. And next, let's go ahead and maybe we want to make this a little bit shorter. And I think it's looking pretty good. We probably want this to say like choose or something. And now we can change the color of this to maybe better match the theme here. I like maybe that gray. And then we can change the border radii to, let's say, 12, and then zoom out and see how it looks. It looks pretty good. I think it's maybe missing a little bit of margin. But all in all, this is a pretty quick process. If we just want to change the texts, the overflow behavior, we can do that as well. So that took me, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes to do, but in general, very quick to make visual edits pretty quickly. And finally, I want to show just how easy it is to bring existing code in. It doesn't need to be created from a prompt or from one of our templates. It should just work on any Flutter app. This is something that we're actively rolling out. So we've limited access, but I will say, if you're super interested in testing this, please DM me because I can obviously give you access. Okay, and this right here is a really fun visual animation of kind of like a liquid glass effect that one of my coworkers made. And I just want to add a couple changes to it. But this time, I'm going to be doing a split view right here with the code. So I can see exactly what I'm editing right next to me. And you can see this is actually spread across 4 separate files, which, a lot of times it's difficult. You have to maintain context for where specific widgets are, even if in your generated app, the build tree has everything consolidated. You have to mentally remember which code to edit here. And in this case, I'm going to skip ahead, but we want to make just a couple changes to, let's say, the blur and adding tilt. And in this case, if we want to add tilt, we have to basically change this transform widget to rotate the Y based off of the offset X and rotate the X based off of the offset Y. And we can go ahead and save that. And live right there, we have this really fun animation. What's cool is that you can click around anywhere on the widget tree when you're in inspect mode, and it just jumps to that place in the code. So you don't have to guess where a specific widget is in your file structure. You can just see it here. And in this case, we're just going to change a network image to an asset image, and then live reload, and everything works as planned. OK, so that was a lot. I want to go right now into, you've seen everything that DreamFlow can do right now, but we have a lot more planned. And I think this is just the start. I want to talk a little bit about what we see is the future here. So obviously that visual and agentic workflow, that really sets the foundation. But beyond that, we're looking at handling collaboration better. And so having version control, being able to connect your GitHub account. Really, we're constantly making changes to the agent to make it smarter. And of course, models are improving at the same time. We're also going to be rolling out that existing code base, upload, and that also works with Git. And finally, we're also allowing you to directly navigate to individual pages, even if you're not there necessarily on the running app. And then, of course, performance and reliability changes as well. And of course, we expect the underlying models to improve too. So you're working with an agent that's really getting smarter at an unbelievable pace. And I think our goal is to make this agent as powerful as possible by loading it with all the necessary context and tools at the right time. So I do actually have one request, given I'm surrounded by probably the most Flutter experts I've ever been in the same room with. At this stage, we're just really interested in feedback. And so it's pretty easy to submit feedback in the product. We just have a submit feedback button. If you have a feature request or a bug, please let us know. This is mainly a tool that we'd love you to test right now. And if you have any existing code bases that you want to add to the tool and test out, again, please DM me. I'd be happy to provide you with that. And my other ask is to please just share what you build. I'm curious to see how the agent is, what types of things you're asking the agent to build, and what types of apps it's able to build. So what's most exciting to me is that we talked about AI, visual, and code, and that these modalities are all kind of converging. They're all part of the same tool. And I think that the future of Flutter development isn't about choosing individual tools, but it's about the powerful combination of all three, with you choosing which one to use and when. And so with that, I am so happy to share the IDE that I think Flutter deserves, and I think it's finally here. Thank you so much.